Welcome to the Freight Agent Insider Podcast, hosted by Levi Van Pay.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Freight Agent Insider, episode 5. This is going to be a good one today. We've got Annique Lesage with us. Annique, thank you so much for joining us today. That is a live audience, by the way, everybody. If you could all remember to please like, subscribe, find us on Spotify, YouTube, even TikTok. A new episode drops every Monday, 9 a.m. Central Time. And speaking of TikTok, it was definitely an interesting meet that Annique and I had. I recently created a TikTok for the show, and Annique was one of the first individuals I came across her content. I was instantly like, this is awesome. So I reached out, and you graciously accepted the invite to the show. And it was shortly after that I realized we were already connected on LinkedIn. Also very interesting because your business name is Small World. Is that right?
Yes, Small World Ventures.
So it's a Small World meetup, I guess. Annique, thank you so much for joining again. Would definitely love kind of some insight on how you found your way into the industry, kind of your backstory, and you know how you ended up where you're at now.
Okay. Well, I started out. I've been in the industry probably about 20 years altogether, and the way that I started out was actually on the shipper side. So I was selecting LTL providers. I was also dealing with customs for items that were coming in from Europe, and I kind of just got very good at it. I have a degree in biology that I never used a day in my life. And
That
this was
transitions,
just,
yep.
it was natural. And I found myself working in this arena. And for the LTL side of things, I had a broker that I worked with out of Florida, and I was not getting a million calls. I was not being solicited. There were no brokers driving around industrial parks taking pictures of companies that they can pursue later on, all of that. We didn't have the tools, that we have now in order to generate new leads and business. I just had this one broker that I was working with. I told her what I needed, and she got it for me. Well, I stopped working there. I started a family. I was married, and I had 3 children under the age of 5. And I could not go and put them in daycare because that would be way more than our mortgage payment. So
Oh yeah.
looking for something that I could do from home and still make very good money, because I was always the breadwinner of the family. So
Right.
had to be it had to be a lateral move in that sense. So I answered an ad for a sales rep or national sales rep for a larger 3PL, and they hired me right away. I didn't have any
Wow.
sales experience. All I had was experience on the shipper side, and they were willing to train. That sounds really wonderful, but in the grand scheme of things, if you are a sales rep or if you're a broker coming into the industry with one of these companies, then read the fine print. Read the fine print as much as possible.
Are you
So
referring to non-competes, non-solicits,
yeah,
NDAs, things
and we
like
can
that?
get
Okay.
into that. That's further into the story. But
Mm-hmm.
so I started there, and they immediately throw you in a training class for 2 weeks after
Yeah.
you sign, your novel of paperwork. And this training class didn't teach anything. I mean, it taught a little bit about equipment. It taught what the difference between LTL and full truckloads were. We didn't learn
Mm-hmm.
anything about specialized equipment, over dimensional, nothing like that. Nothing about permits and escorts if you have something that's oversized. It was really just the basics and nothing about selling. So once your 2 weeks is up in this training class, if you pass it, they're like, great, go forth, do wonderful things. And you end up in a sea of cubicles, and everybody is just smiling and dialing, and you got to, make 100 calls a day. They wanted us to focus primarily on LTL shipments, at least the
Yep.
newbies. And because they were easy, they seemed finite. They were a quick sell. You don't have to waste hours looking for a truck and having things posted up. It was just a really good way to get your foot in the door. But unfortunately, the leads that they were providing me were all truckload leads. So everything that I would call, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll use you," and I didn't know anything. I don't know why they were saying, "Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You're our girl. Give us your info," because I knew nothing. So because of that, I started out just doing truckloads, and yeah, there were some LTLs interspersed in there. That's never been my meat and potatoes. But I made so many mistakes, and I lost so much money the first month or so. And I felt like I was drowning because I didn't know what I was doing. And in the meantime, they're having cornhole in the cubicles and free beer Fridays and, costume parties and talent shows and all this stuff. And I'm like, can someone just train me on how to find a truck and how to rate things properly? Because I'm losing money. And while I was getting a lot of traction with customers promising to ship with me, because again, in those companies, you have 90 days. You have 30 days to get a customer to promise to ship with you. You have 60 days to, earn the business. And then if you don't have anything on the board by 90 days, you're out, you're gone.
Adios.
So,
right.
It's kind of cutthroat. And so I knew that even though I was getting traction and I was getting these customers and they were, giving credit applications left and right, I was not making any money. I was losing it. And they're like, it's fine. You'll make it up on the back end. But we had quotas too. So I was nowhere near making that. The way that they are also set up is you have a customer service department, you have a carrier sales department, you have all these different departments that are supposed to handle every other thing for your shipments. And all you're supposed to do is sell, rate, get it booked, and then move on to the next customer. But if your rates are bad, that carrier sales team is not touching that load, because they're not going to be able to find a carrier for it. So my stuff was either losing money or not getting covered, and it was not looking good for me. So there are these two women that sat on either side of me. Whenever I talk about them, I refer to them as broads in ladies' clothing, because they would look at these people doing free beer Friday and they'd be like, these idiots, And they were like, listen, we are not friends, but we're going to help you. And so they taught me what to do. And immediately they were like, talk to drivers, get a rate from a truck driver first, and then add your margin to it, and then give it to the customer. It's still going to be lower than the competition because they're inflating it. They also don't know what they're doing, and they're just throwing numbers at the wall to see if it sticks. Yours is going to be accurate. You're going to have a truck in hand, and you're still going to make money, and you're going to get your revenue based upon the volume, not off of the margin. And that is going to make sure that that's going to ensure that you're not part of the 90 days turnover. So that's what I started to do. It turned things around, and I was really getting frustrated because the carrier sales team, they're not going to touch that freight or that load to cover it if it doesn't look like it's going to be a huge margin, because they work off of percentage too. So what would end up happening is I would be covering my own trucks and my own loads. I would be making all the calls to drivers, and to management, it looked like I was making 500 calls a day, which awesome. Good for you, Annique. We like to see that initiative, but I'm not calling new customers. I'm calling truck drivers. So after a while, the relationships that I made, one of the drivers said, why don't you just break out on your own and do this on your own? You're going to make so much more money. And I said, well, I like the salary. I like the benefits. I like all of that. And I said, I was promised that, once this 90 days is up, I can work from home. And he was like, well, you're going to be working from home anyway, but what are you making? Just throw some numbers. So I told him, And that was the first instance of transparency that everybody likes to yell about. I told a truck driver how much I made,
Yeah.
and and he was like, "Oh my God, go break out on your own, just go." So I did, and then I got sued because so I found creative ways around that,
Hmm.
where I wouldn't pursue the same customers that I did, while I was in that company. However, when you're breaking out on your own and you don't have any customers, you're not allowed to ship with anybody. That's really scary.
Right.
So I said, I have to get real serious about this and just use what I know and rebuild. And I did. I used social media. There was no Zoom info. There was no services out there that created lists for you. There was nothing like that at the time. I went on Twitter when it was still Twitter. I went and followed all of the companies that I was no longer allowed to work with, because then Twitter would suggest three more companies just like it. And
Right.
if that company ships, then those three ship if they're just like it. And those were my leads, and then so on and so forth. And by the end of my first week, I probably had about 2,500 leads, just because I was like sun up to sundown researching this. And then within 2 weeks, I had people shipping with me. And then it
Do
just
you,
grew from there.
Annique, do you still use that tactic with, I believe it's now X, for
No,
customer
I'm not on
acquisition?
there. No,
Not on there. Okay.
I save my
I know
money.
you're I know you're bigger on TikTok. Do you use first of all, what's a day in the life like of an agent where you are very active? You've got a big following on TikTok. How do you balance that with your freight operations? And has TikTok, in kind of the same way Twitter helped you, has TikTok helped you with customer acquisition or even carrier relationships?
So I went into TikTok with the idea that I was going to gain customers. And the thing is that customers are working and they're too busy loading trucks. They're too busy,
Right.
just navigating the problems that come with freight. They're not sitting there scrolling. So I mentioned this before elsewhere, but your ROI it's not necessarily monetary. So I've become a better broker myself by being on that app, because I've put myself out there honestly. And here I am, even 20 years later, thinking that I'm doing everything right. And then I make a video about something, day in the life or whatever, and there are these drivers like, see, there's the problem with this, blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, I don't want to piss you guys off. I
Right.
want I want things to be right between us, because if things are right here, then that's going to be better for everyone over there.
Right.
So, I did not get this huge customer base out of TikTok. What I did was I dispelled a lot of the misconceptions and stereotypes about brokers to drivers. There's a lot of things that I put out there that they were like, I didn't know that, but that makes sense. I had a lot of hatred about that, but now I see why. And then vice versa with drivers. So I can understand them a little bit better. And
Yeah.
the value that that brings to my customers is, if I come to them with a rate that looks really wonky from what everybody else is saying, they can ask why. And I can give an honest answer, an honest and truthful and well thought out, researched answer with boots on the ground, wheels on the road. And it doesn't automatically mean that Annique is just trying to make extra money. Now it's like, what does Annique know that nobody else knows? Because they know that
That's right.
I'm advocating for both. So when people talk about, just going on TMS platforms where direct shippers can just put their stuff up on a load board and then drivers can come and bid on it or just book it right from there, that effectuates a ton of freight just sitting there on a dock for a really long time, because there's nobody there communicating to that shipper why that rate is not going to work for anybody. And there's nobody communicating to the driver that, this is why the rate is what it is. Like, maybe the lane does say that the rate should be a little bit higher, but you could partial this and they're okay with that. But nobody is
Right.
communicating it. Nobody is talking. So that is essentially what a broker is supposed to do. We're supposed to be a salesperson for that driver in addition to a salesperson for that customer. So
That is an incredible.
that's what the benefit has been of me being on that app.
Yeah, that's great, Annique. I never really thought of it in that light, and you're kind of spelling out the actual need of a freight broker in a different angle, I guess. I love that. And actually, before we hopped on, we were talking a little bit off the podcast about a situation that you have going on with a customer right now, and this kind of ties into that. Do you mind kind of telling us a little bit more
I don't mind.
about that?
Sure. Well, to start, the start of this story is probably 2 years ago, where sorry, my email keeps on banging.
Busy.
So about 2 years
Business is
ago,
booming.
I have this yeah, I have this customer, and I've been with them since day one. The only person that is the original person in that company is the accounting woman, and she started off as a clerk, and now she's CFO. And
Wow.
the truth of the matter is when I left my original company that I started out with, I couldn't ship with them because they were a customer of that company. But they realized that I was no longer legally obligated to not work with them. So as soon as a couple years passed, they were like, "Hey, what are you doing?" So since then, the shipping manager has changed over about 4 times. And when one would quit, they would train the next one, work with her. And then another one would quit. They would train that person, work with her. Then somebody got fired and a new person came in, and I was like, "Hey, I've been your person or one of your people for a really long time. So what do you say?" And they're like, "Well, I bring my own contacts, and you're going to start from scratch with us." And I still kept on going with them. But somewhere along the line, CFO came along and said, "Hey, we're signing a contract with an asset-based provider that also offers LTL, a platform for RNL and Central Transport, all of them. We're signing a
Yep.
contract." And so the shipping manager said, "Okay, we'll do that. I'm keeping a broker, and it's going to be her." And so anytime anything happens with them where they fall off or anything, I can go to her and she can recover it. And there might even be lanes that she's really good at that their assets don't go into. So he
Right.
sold me. He sold me to the CFO. I had no idea all of that was going on because a lot of my volume really didn't go down. They were still using me that much.
Right. Right.
So um, then, probably 2 years ago now, he asked me to rate something. It was Wisconsin to Illinois. And if you're just going off of RateView, if you're just going off of one of those quoting portals, then it's going to show maybe $800, $900 for the lane. But if you're speaking to drivers and you're seeing the way that the direction that they have to go, where they have to go around the lake, that equates to more like $1,300, $1,400. So I confidently quoted 1350. I have a driver in hand. And he comes back and he says, "Well, our asset-based contract has a rate of 700 or 750 or something like that." And I said, "All right, take it." He asked if I could match it, and I said I won't. Not only can I not, but I will not. Even if I found someone who would do it at that rate, I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't want to send them into your facility to do this.
The
Because
question that I have for you on that, Annique, is when you see something like that, where there is another broker carrier that's trying to undercut you, when you're confident in the rate that you're giving, do you explain to your customer that they might be doing this on a short-term basis to get their foot in the door with the customer? Or what is your approach in these situations?
I don't approach anything in the sense of, as I said before, I don't disparage anybody.
Mm-hmm.
No, I won't do that. All I can do is clearly line up, clearly explain what my boundary is. So I'm not going to say anything about this person. I am just going to assert that when this doesn't work out, this is what you can expect from me. Now your shipment is an emergency. Now it's emergent, which means that your emergency is somebody else's paycheck. And I will really try hard not to make it mine. Like, I'm not going to take advantage of you, but it is definitely going to be a driver's paycheck. So if
That's
all of
right.
a sudden you need somebody to pick this up within an hour, and they're 40 miles away and they got a haul, that's going to cost you. So I can't guarantee that this rate is going to remain the same if it's on an emergent basis. We all know what hot means. So go ahead and take that. When it doesn't work out, I hope you have it in your budget to go a few $100s more. Or
That's very important.
you can take this now and spend a little bit more because you're not like dazzled by a really low number, and know for sure that it's going to get picked up and it's going to be delivered on time, and you have somebody like me making your appointments for you. And a lot of the times that is the convincer, that's the sell point. But these shippers are also bound by corporate, or they're bound by a CFO, and somebody else has the final decision on that budget, and that's fine, as long as they also okay when they have to pay out that extra $100 or $200. So in this instance, that happened. He went and he took it, and I did have to recover it because they didn't have somebody available, and it was a few $100s more. And now 2 years later, he asks me to quote it again, and I said, I said, this is what the rate's going to be. I know for sure. And he says, oh, well, this company again, they came back with like $850. Can you match that? And I said, no. Yeah. And not only can I not match it today, I couldn't match it then. But let's remember what happened last time. And he was like, you are right. And I said, if anything, just make sure they actually have a truck. Just ask them for driver information and truck information and tracking right now, so that you can know for sure. That'll just cover your base. And he was like, okay, I'll do that. So he did come back and he was like, yeah, they absolutely have an asset in the area. They can do it. And I said, good, close call. But remember that next time.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're really kind of spelling out the importance of your position without, like you said, disparaging the other company. I think that you said something before we hopped on that really resonated with me, that your shippers are smart, and to think otherwise is an insult, obviously, to them. I actually take the same approach on the recruiting side of business. Like, the idea of poaching customers or poaching agents, it almost puts things in it puts things in a way of like they're not smart enough to make decisions for themselves because they have blinders on, or maybe they're thinking the grass is greener, whatever the case. But the reality is these are smart individuals that we're dealing with, and treating them like them goes a much further way, I think.
Sure. I mean, I try, and no matter what I'm doing, whether I am dealing with a shipper or a driver, anybody, to assume ignorance before I assume malice. And when I say assume ignorance, I don't mean it in a really negative way. It's just people don't know what they don't know. So
That's right.
in that sense, um, I don't know. I just my email just pinged and I lost my train of thought. But so I do assume that. So I don't approach things as a salesperson. I don't. Like,
Yeah.
things need to move. You need to move your stuff from point A to point B. You already know that you have that need. So I'm not selling you anything because it's already sold. Now you are just looking for options. I'm selling the options. So I don't have to go through things in a hard sell manner. I go through it in a way of educating to motivate. And so
That's
if
right.
you have the options in front of you, fully transparent of what it is, and this is the rate, then you know what it is exactly that you're going to be paying for. And now you've worked with me enough to know how I'm going to manage that. And the same applies with drivers. If I'm posting something on a load board, I'm putting every single detail in that posting, every single one, so that you know what it is that you're responding to. And still, I get are you sure that it's this city that it picks up in? And I'm like, why would I post some random city that you barely know how to spell? Like, that is exactly where that is exactly where it's picking up. You're going to
Right.
see exactly how far you have to deadhead and if it's worth it for you. And
Right.
usually my rate is in there as well. And still they'll be like, rate, and I'm like, it's right there.
Right.
Right there. And maybe there's some wiggle room with it or whatever, but I hear a lot of complaints about, I'm not going to respond to any posting that doesn't have a rate in it. And I'm like, well, why? Because you don't pay attention to it anyway. And you're also throwing out your obscure number and wanting a little, parry and thrust with it, a little skin in the game.
Yeah.
And, it's like in your blood to negotiate. So what does it matter if
That's
it's
right.
posted or not? Just throw your number out there.
That's right.
Take your shot. What are you afraid of? Get some confidence. So.
I love that. I love that. And switching gears a little bit, Annique, because I could honestly talk to you about this for hours, but we only have 35 minutes. As far as your content on TikTok, I just think it's such a refreshing way of going about things. I think that's a little bit different than a lot of other brokers and agents out there. Is there any tips or advice that you can give to others that I advocate for being, having a voice, finding your voice and putting it out there on social media? We should all have one, especially in this industry. Is there any type of freight content that you think performs better than anything else or better than other things on TikTok?
Well, the sensationalism stuff and the call outs and the, when you're smack talking people or putting people on blast, that's always going to generate the clicks. That's always going to generate the views. But also that's a flash in the pan. That's lightning in a bottle. You'll get
That's right.
thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views off of that, but maybe not follows, and definitely not business. If all you're doing that for, you're going to get some comments and everything, but those are not the kind of comments that you're going to convert into conversations off of the app and then business in the future. That's just going to be like,
right.
Oh, that's funny, entertaining. Let me scroll. Let me swipe. So, avoid the sensationalism, avoid the call out stuff unless it's really relevant and it's made to protect people and shed some light on things. But I find that when I'm clearly and concisely responding to comments that are meant to either shame brokers or, insult me with a specific topic or subject, and then
right.
I respond to it with, hey, I understand why you think that, but here's what's happening in the background that you can't see. And then I explain it a little bit, and you come to maybe a meeting of minds, or maybe okay, well, we'll tone down the rhetoric a little bit and agree to disagree. I'll never quite understand it because that's not my area, but I respect the hustle, I guess.
Yeah.
So when it's more like that, when you're bridging the gap, that's got the more lasting power, and that's what makes people remember you a little bit more. And I think that the problem is that a lot of the creators are chasing the rage baiting a little bit, and they're they're trying to rile up the masses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that their names are not going to be remembered after a while.
Well said. Well said. One last question on this topic, and we'll transition to our very last segment. There's a commonality that I've seen amongst a lot of successful brokers, and it's that they've had some type of start in service-based industries like serving, bartending. And in a couple of ways, I think TikTok is a little bit similar in that you're kind of putting yourself on a stage, and some similarities, I guess you could say, with like those other things. Do you find yourself in a position of you're finding customer contacts kind of in the same way you might in like a bar serving setting through TikTok, or B, are you like facing any like potential backlash with customers because of your content?
There are several customers of mine that follow me, and probably one of my bigger contracts follow me, and he loves it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like sometimes I talk about a situation that happens, at their facility when something picks up, and they'll sit there and comment on it like that was crazy. There's one video that I have where one of my customers, she usually once a week like has this flatbed load that goes out, and it never needs tarps. Well, today or that day it needed tarps, and she didn't communicate that to me in time before the driver showed up. And she's there, she's texting me, and he's there, and he's like, well, I don't have any tarps. And she's got a loader that sees inside of his truck, and he's like, aren't those tarps? And so he's like, oh, well, okay. And then he goes and he looks, and he's like, I don't have enough tarps. And they're like, your back is full of tarps. And then he says, okay, well, yeah, I have tarps, but I don't know if I can, get up there. And they're like, well, that's fine. We have a crane. Like, we have a tarping machine. We can do that. You just have to strap them down. And then he says, okay, well, company policy is $250 for tarps. And for me, first off, now you've just established yourself as a little bit of a liar. So now I'm going to question everything that you say.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, you have a company. Do you have an accessorial schedule filed with us? And he's like, well, I mean, the back office would have had to do that. And I said, okay, well, let me just look in your profile. And he's on the phone with me, and I'm going through his profile. And I said, there's no accessorial sheet here. So do you want me? I'll put you on three-way with the back office, and we'll talk about that. And maybe they can send it in to see what your company policy is for tarping. And at this point, it's not about the number. It's about the fact that you think that I'm stupid. And we could have had a relationship. We could have done this on a regular basis.
Right.
But now you lied to me, and I'm never sending you in there again. And you ought to be glad that I'm not sending you out.
Right.
But if it wasn't for the fact that my customer was there texting me, laughing about the whole situation, then, I would have. So then I'm like, all right, I'm going to three-way your office. And he's like, well, I'm the owner. And I said, oh, you're the owner. So it's not the back office. You're the back office?
Yeah,
and
you are.
Like, well, don't worry about it. I'll give you a discount, just $150, we'll just this time. And I was like, okay, $150 coming your way. So I made a video about that. And of course, the driver mentality, they have like such hive mentality. Their first instinct is to defend the driver. Like, you should have paid him $250. And I said, it's not about that. It's the lie. Like,
that's right.
You can't say that you want, ethics and you want respectability in this industry if you're going to defend the first person who is acting unethically and,
crucial,
without dignity. So I make this video, and my customer is right there in the comments, and she was like that, she's commenting on it. And then more and more people are commenting, and she comes back and she's like, are they still talking about these stupid tarps? So they're fun. I mean, they love it. They love I think that what they love the most is that I don't come on and brag. I talk about my losses in addition to the wins, and I try to help other people get more wins, because my motto across the board, whether you're a shipper, a broker, a driver, whatever, is you cannot compete with me, because I want all of us to win. So let's all just do it the right way. And so, but I've never connected with anybody in a real way. I've never earned anything. I've never had a true relationship with anybody by just showing the perfect.
Right.
Not the flaws. Like, you have to talk about the things that you've done wrong and be accountable for those. And I think that that's what they love the most too, because if they see me blasting that all over the internet, then they know that when I mess up with their stuff, I'm going to own it, and I'm going to fix it as best as I can.
You're extremely authentic, and I think authenticity, that's a selling point in itself. Annique, we'll transition. We'll keep this last part just in a couple minutes if we can.
Sure.
So this last piece is pitfalls and horror stories, and you might have already kind of alluded to it earlier with the lawsuit. I don't know if you can even talk about that. If there is another pitfall or horror story that you'd like to talk about, I'm sure we'd be interested in hearing it.
Well, it's a horror story with a happy ending when we talk.
Absolutely.
But so nowadays it's very hard to enforce a non-compete. I think that most people have taken them out of their employee paperwork,
Right.
whatever. So that is a tactic that these companies use in order to keep you from bringing your customers with you somewhere else, at least for a period of time.
Yep.
But simultaneously, while you're working there and you have this signed and it's an act, they're wanting you more and more to put out the company name and not your name. It's a conformity thing. It's not a individual thing. Like this broker is great there, but that broker is not. They just want the company name. Like that brokerage is wonderful, and so you're putting out a whole bunch of stuff on social media. You're tagging them with hashtags. You're shouting them out. All of this stuff, so that when you do leave, if you decide to, buck at that non-compete, that customer is only going to really recognize the name and not so much the broker that they were working with. So they want you more to sell a logo than your service. So now you've left and they know they have this non-compete in place, but there's always the possibility that somebody goes rogue and they're not going to pay attention to the legalities of it. So immediately once you leave, I saw them do this with 3 other brokers that left, and I know they did this with me because one of them forwarded this to me. They'll say things like, they'll send out a blast email to your customers and say, please let us know if they ever physically threatened you. Please let us know if you ever thought that they were intoxicated or under controlled substances while they were trying to book your freight. That, like, it's a suggestion, it's an innuendo, it's not an actual accusation, and it's not an actual fact. So if you try to bring them to court for libel or slander or anything like that, it's not going to stick. Like, you can't, because it's just implied. They're not stating it as fact.
They're trying to plant a seed in the customer's brain that you're doing these things.
Right. So that they don't go. And there were plenty of them that were like, we heard some really stupid stuff about you. The one that they did about me was, please let us know if Annique ever asked for your credit card number to pay for a shipment instead of sending you to accounts receivable or
oh my God,
getting a credit application. Please let us know if Annique ever asked you for your social security number. Like things like that. Let us know if she did that, not she did do that. That's the difference. Words matter there,
Wow.
So you have to pull the string a little bit. So now I'm like, well, I'm just gonna do what I want because they did whatever they want. So I tried to pursue some of my customers and say, hey, I'm moving out, kicking rocks from them, counting mailboxes. Come with me if you want. And some of them were like, we don't want to get involved in that. Others were like, were you trying to steal identities? And others were like, we're on board because that's BS. And a couple of them that landed in my lap, they were like, well, they did that with the last broker that we worked with, but they were just implying that, he might have been arrested that night, something.
Right.
So they're like, we see the pattern. And so I tried, and then I get served with this lawsuit. And at first it was really confusing because they were like the comma was in the wrong place. So first it looked like they were only suing me for $1,000, and I was like, okay. And then it turns out that they were suing me for $10,000, and that's a big difference. So when you're just starting out and you have to rebuild entirely, that $10,000 looks like a lot, and you get really intimidated. But I'm still working while it's in litigation. I'm still getting new clients while it's being mediated. And even then, I had an employment lawyer who looked over the contract and he was like, it's ironclad. Like, you can't do this. You can't work. And I said, well, I'm gonna. So if all I have to do is pay $10,000 in order to continue working, then that's what I'm going to do. And so they were like, well, at your own risk. We didn't hear it. we're a lawyer. You can't admit that stuff to us. But I did. And then it went and defaulted. They got a $10,000 judgment on me. And at first that's very daunting. It's very scary. But then you realize that, like, you just go to the Department of Financial Relief or whatever, and you make a payment plan. And it could be as little as $20 a month. You can do that. I don't care if you're just starting out. Even if you're bartending at night while you're trying to kick this into high gear, you're going to be able to spare $20 a month.
And anybody can do that.
Anybody can do that. I considered it as an investment into opening up my own business. Like, I already had a laptop. I already had a cell phone. I already had all of the bells and whistles.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to invest anything else there. So whatever I would have invested there if I was starting absolutely from scratch, now this is just my ability to work. And that's fine. But as it turns out, somebody did mess up, and they did make the actual accusation about me. Like, not somebody in HR or management, but just one of the brokers who actually had one of my customers passed on to them. And they did say it. That Annique did this. So now I was like, I got your ass. And so I went and I said, you can either enforce this $10,000, or we can just call it a wash, because I'm going to sue you. Because since you're not promoting individual brokers and you're promoting the name, the name of this company has just made an accusation about me or said I did something which is false. So what would you like to do? You want $10,000, or do you want to leave me alone? So
they backed off.
They backed off.
So it was a horror story with a happy ending.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad that you are where you are now, because it brought us together on this show, and we really appreciate you, Annique. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me, and I love what you're trying to do, and just keep it up.
Is there any last tips that you have for anybody on the younger end of the spectrum looking to become a broker, especially if you're a female looking to do this? It's a male-dominated market and can be extremely daunting. Any tips there?
It's not a male-dominated market, or not a male-dominated industry. It's a male gate-kept industry. And it's a male-prioritized industry, and it's a very male-supported industry, and a very male-upheld industry, but it is not dominated, because I'm here and I'm killing it. And 2 women trained me, and I've trained many women after me. But if you're a woman coming into this industry, just know your voice. Don't try to sit at anybody else's table. Make your own. You're never going to fit in there. You don't want to fit in there. Don't try to play with the boys, because you're not supposed to. You're supposed to do your own thing. Sales is not a team sport. And for anybody, regardless of your gender, regardless of who you are coming into this industry, everybody, whether it's a shipper, your fellow brokers, drivers, even yourself, they're going to value honesty over expert. That's it. They love an honest answer more than an expert opinion any day of the week. And
love it.
So take your imposter syndrome, instead of pushing ego, use that imposter syndrome to be a little curious and find the answers, and dot your I's and cross your T's. Nobody expects you to know everything right away. And so just keep yourself open to learning more. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I learn new stuff every single day.
Annique, huge applause to you. That was so well said. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. Thank you so much again for everything and taking the time with us today.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Sure.